Before we get started, I'm extremely proud to say that this episode of The Petrified Comedian was brought to you by 4x3. 4x3 is an independent media company creating comedy content on YouTube. This week they dropped feature sets by Tuxford Turner and Fat Freddy. Support independent comedy at youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE or by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Enjoy the show. Winston Hodges is one of the premier stand-up comedians in DC. He's got a unique blend of southern charm and edgy wit. You can find his incredibly moving, award-winning special, Grieving Productively, on YouTube, or listen to his newest special, Already Where, on Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, or Bandcamp. Winston, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, if you could describe your comedy in 3 words, what would they be?
Oh man, that is uh, ugh. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's that's tough. 3 words. I don't know. I guess I would describe it as fine, I guess. So well, like that's pretty much, yeah. That's tough, man, because I'm very bad at I'm pretty bad at being able to know, what exactly my style is. I usually try to ask, like, I'll ask other people what they think, how to describe it, and they're almost all different. So it's pretty hard to put a pin in what I'm doing.
I love asking comedians that question because they never answer it quite how you want them to, which is
Yeah.
it shows what kind of people comedians are. Like the last answer I got to that was I believe it was pretty and dumb.
Yeah. It's tough because it's just like you don't want to, like, uh, say something too grand or grandiose or whatever. And then that's like that's the opposite of what, what you what I think a person should do, which is just like make fun of yourself a little bit. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good. We're starting off with very difficult questions here. I don't I don't think I was.
Well, I hope that's one of the more difficult ones.
Yeah,
I know you come from a teaching background.
yeah,
My girlfriend and I were listening to your stand-up special, and she's currently a substitute teacher, working her way into
cool.
having full time in a classroom. And like specifically your bit about dry erase markers
Oh
just
yeah,
literally had her out of breath. I don't think she's related to a bit in comedy more than that,
good.
period. Um, but you did mention that you have quit teaching.
Yeah,
Are you working towards comedy being your full-time job?
yeah. So comedy's been my full time gig since about September of 2020. So I haven't had another job for about 2.5 years now. So yeah, it was
That's
I was
awesome.
work. Yeah, I mean it was something. It was I mean, lucky's not the word. It's just like I got, like, during the pandemic, I got furloughed and put on unemployment for like a month. And during that time, I made a plan to move from Richmond, Virginia to Washington, D.C. And I moved up here. We went remote, which was great. And then they called us back to work. So I had to, like, kind of quit. And by the time I started looking for a new job up in DC, I kind of realized, like, that I could just kind of make stand up work, and kind of was like, oh, I'll just pursue this until I financially can't do it anymore. And knock on wood, it's been not going great, but it's, I haven't had to get a day job. So that part's been great. Being poor
You know,
sucks.
I think comedy is all relative, right? Like I started off talking to comedians that were specifically just from Cincinnati,
Yeah.
because I sort of had an in being from there, and none of them have gotten to the point where they're able to quit their job yet. So, it's there's a bunch of different levels of success when it comes to
Yeah, I don't know
comedy.
if I would have ever quit teaching or moved if COVID hadn't happened. Because I'm very much a creature of habit, and, like, I had a nice rhythm, and, like, I was coming up to DC regularly, but I was getting to do a lot of road stuff out of Richmond. And then I'm really glad that the pandemic hit, because I moved up here. I've become a much better comedian in the last 2.5 years, and I've gotten to do a lot of really, really, really cool things and made some good connections just from being up here. So
Well, yeah, and I mean, in doing research for you, you were incredibly driven during the pandemic. Like,
Oh
I
yeah, I
think it
was.
was it was not you didn't have one podcast, you had what, three podcasts?
Yeah, my life was really sad, Adam. I had a really sad life where I couldn't just enjoy a little vacation for a year, where I just was like, but yeah, I had like multiple podcasts going that I had already started, and then I started another one, and then just like I was doing Zoom open mics, like I was doing, dude, I was doing so much comedy on Zoom because it was just like for a minute I was living with my mom, so I was nervous about doing even some outdoor shows. So I would do like some, but I didn't like my dad died from cancer 3 years ago. He had died like the year before, and I literally was like, dude, if I get COVID at a show and I kill my mom, I was like, I can't, I don't, dude, I would, I don't know what I, yeah, it would be rough. I don't really know how I would deal with that in therapy, but yeah, so like I was, I don't know how you handle that. Like, yeah, my dad died from cancer, and then my mom died because I had a hot new five that I needed to try out in a parking lot in Richmond. But so I would do some outdoor shows, but I was doing a lot of Zoom, and I met a lot of really nice people on Zoom. But it is like not fun. Comedy felt like work for a fucking year, where I was doing like 20 Zoom shows a week. So it was just like, so getting a bunch of reps in. I had a bunch of new material when stuff finally came back, and I wasn't rusty at all. But it definitely was like not a good time. COVID sucked. It was not. I wish I could have been a normal person that was just like, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy this extra time and get caught up on TV shows. And I wish, I'm just going to go drive to an empty beach somewhere and just enjoy. Yeah, but I couldn't do that. I was, so I guess severely mentally ill is how you would describe it. So,
I think everyone in comedy has a
yeah,
little
man.
touch.
Yeah, everybody, dude. There's some like real crazies in stand up, but like I think everybody's got like, because if you just like on paper looked at like someone that's like, oh, you went on Zoom and told jokes 20 times a week for no money instead of exploring the new city you lived in and going for walks and like you know what I mean? Just like building your life in better ways. They're just like, yeah, this person should be medicated. This person should be on something to get them out of this depression.
So I'm sure like it was a huge adjustment for me going from in-person meetings to to Zoom meetings. What's it like doing Zoom comedy?
It sucks, dude. It sucks. And sometimes it's fun because every now and then you would get. So the problem is it's just like most of them were basically open mics with just comics at them, and it became like this scene almost where there were so many comics that would just so you would see the same comics at things, and so it would be the same thing where it's like these people have heard these jokes, even if they're good, they don't care. It was a lot of like inexperienced or newer comics in it, so it was just like a
Mhm.
weird to go from like I don't know, man. For like, I felt like I was one of the few comics. Like, there was a handful that like had gotten to work in clubs and do things and was like making money doing stand up. And doesn't mean that those comics were bad. It was just like, oh, it was just different. It felt like just oh, all these people are new. All these people are new. But I met some really cool, nice, dope people in different cities where I've gotten to meet them in real life, and they've helped me with get shows and stuff. So it's been very it was a cool experience, but it's the type of thing where like I liked the community aspect of it because I really missed that from regular stand up. But man, did I fucking hate the shows. And it's more fun, man. It was just like being in a Zoom meeting trying to make people laugh, and some people would force laughter or they would like be really good friends with someone, so they just laugh at them and it's not funny. And it's like, man, this is like we're not so just trying to parse out like, oh, is this good? What is this funny? Like what are we doing? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, like, is this funny bit? Because so one of the goals of this podcast, it's called the Petrified Comedian. I'm
Yeah.
trying to push myself into trying comedy. It's
Have
one
you
of
not
the
tried it yet?
only No, it's one of the only creative endeavors I've never tried.
Damn.
So I sing, I play music, I do all sorts of stuff. I've acted. The idea of writing my own material, getting up on a stage and being the one person that people are looking at is just terrifying to me.
Yeah.
So like in college, I went to OSU. They had actually kind of a great comedy club there where twice a year they'd actually bring a national act on and
Oh,
you could
that's
open
cool.
for them. Yeah, it could have been an awesome opportunity. I avoided that club like the plague. I had a friend
Oh
in it.
man.
I was terrified. So my goal with doing this podcast was to A, get some advice from comedians who are actively doing it. But B, the setup of this podcast is by episode 10, I have to do my first open mic.
Oh damn,
So
what episode is this?
this is five.
Okay,
So
we're
I'm
halfway there.
halfway there, but I've written the 5 minutes.
Okay.
I have it ready and I'm practicing it every moment I get pretty much. Um, but I have a bunch of friends who want to show up and be supportive and they're like, I want to learn the jokes ahead of time and laugh for you. And I'm like, I want to see if my
No.
jokes are worthy of their own laughs instead
Yep.
of that, you know?
No,
Um,
that's definitely what you want to do. Also, just some heads up: if you bring a bunch of friends to an open mic, and they come to the because I'm assuming it's an open mic,
oh yeah.
they're gonna make you go last. That's just what like so
Oh,
you're gonna go
okay.
last. That's the rule. That's just what happens. It's just like you're brand new, you bring an audience because if you're early and you're in the good spot of the show, your friends are gonna leave. That's just how
Yeah.
comedy works, and that's well you if the showrunner for the mic is any good at all, he's gonna pull that old trick where it's just gonna be like, "Hey, you're closing that." That's what I would tell people. I was like, "Hey, man, that's like this is such a big night for you. We want you to headline this open mic. We want you to do that." And then just like their friends would stick around or whatever, because it's like because it puts so if you don't go last, it puts you as a new comic in a terrible position because it's like let's say you go early, then either your
Mhm.
friends leave and all the comics are pissed at you for your friends leaving, or they don't leave and they're just talking. And you know what I mean? Just like and then then
Yeah.
you're like, oh fuck, do I tell them to shut up? Like these are my friends. Like what I do, and every comic's like, tell your friends to shut the fuck up. What's going on? Yeah, so you'll yeah, so man, that'll be great. Your first time will be headlining, so it'll be really fun.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Good to know ahead of time because I was
Yeah.
definitely not planning on going last.
Yeah. So they'll which is what they'll do. They might do you like a if they don't like some of the other comics on the show, they'll put them after you. But like in
Mhm.
general, they'll like yeah, we always just do last because it's just like I don't know. It's we always assume like these people are going last because their friends are here, but also like this is kind of a big night, so it's like it's not a big deal for you to stay out later. You know what I mean? Like this is like a thing
Yeah.
you've prepped for. You get to enjoy it. You get to watch all these other comics go up. Your friends get to give laughter. They get to get warmed up by hopefully some like good experienced comics, and then by the time you go up, they're still excited because you're their friend and they want to support your friend. So it's like a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Do you know what mic you're going to do it at? Do you have it picked out?
I don't have it picked out. I have a couple of friends in the city who there's a couple of open mic spots around Columbus that they
Yeah.
kind of do a circuit at. So what's been crazy about comedy is like it really is. I do feel already this aspect of community because I've just mentioned in passing to a couple of people that I'm writing a set, and I've already just from that like I've had people say, "Oh, you know, my sister's in Columbus doing comedy right now. You should link up with her and get this
That's
group
pretty
together
cool.
going." So yeah, so I that's been awesome because I do feel like I can kind of feed on their experience to know is where's a good place to go try an open mic for the first time. Um, but you know, some of the advice I've gotten is just make sure it's an open mic. Don't go to a comedy club first. Like
Yes.
that's not a good idea for any
Yeah.
first
Just
timer.
just do a mic. There's like no stakes. It's you're working on something new, and that's where you're going to meet the comics in your city. Like that's where you're going to
Yeah.
meet the most comics. In general, you're probably going to meet comics where um that are like also new or newer, and like you kind of will just like if you continue it, you'll just like kind of work your way up the ladder or like or whatever. So yeah, open mics are good for that, especially like when you're starting. That's the yeah, definitely don't go to a comedy club and try to ask for time. You seem like a crazy person. That's like
So bringing it back to teaching, did any of your fellow teachers ever see you do stand up?
oh yeah, man. A lot of my coworkers saw me do stand up. A lot of my students saw it because I would post online, and then like a couple of them found it, and I was like, oh man, this sucks. But and I've had like some of my old students find me. I find my stand up afterwards, so it's like in the last year or so, I've had students comment like, "Oh, it's so and so from your class," and like I taught at a school for autism, so I'm like, "Oh my
Mhm.
God, like what you know?" And I know these kids pretty well, and I'm like, "Oh man, please don't say anything horrifying on my YouTube video because you think it's funny." Uh, but yes, but yeah, a bunch of my teachers, I'm still friends with some of them. I was like, but like, yeah, they would like come to shows sometimes. They would come to like big shows and like, or if they just needed something to do. And I had a couple friends that came to a lot. So it was, yeah, it was pretty, yeah. Whenever I've had like a not, most of my friends are comics or like comedy adjacent or friends
Mhm.
through my girlfriend or whatever. Or like for people that I've met through stand up that have become friends, whether they're like audience members or like bookers or people that run places. But the last like friend group I had that was outside of comedy was like my teaching and like coworker groups because it's just like I think those are the easiest people to be friends with. You see them every day. It's like
Mhm.
being in like high school where it's like your friends are your friends because they're the people you're forced to spend 8 hours a day with, 5 days a week, and it's like it's you better make them friends because if not, your life's gonna be miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I back when I worked at the zoo, we had a one of our coworkers did a bunch of open mics where he would perform with his ukulele, and we always came out to
Oh, that's
just show
fun.
some support. That was a lot of fun. Did you ever get your boys' night out with Jeremy?
No, I have not. I've not gotten to do that with Jeremy. I think he's still like what age would he be right now? Because he's one of the people that commented on my so like with the teaching stuff. The rules I was given at the school was because I was doing comedy before I started teaching there. So like I came into a meeting and I said, "Hey, I'm a comic. I talk about my life. What are the rules?" I was like, "I don't want to break any rules. Give me the
Mhm.
rules right now, day one." And then like one of the heads of the school was like, "You can't ever say the name of the school, and you can't ever say the actual name of the kid." So I kind of at first would do different names that had the same number of syllables. So like Jeremy and the actual kid's name, they they both start with the same letters, right? And so then I have like Brittany and like other things where it's like, oh, these are the same syllables, they start with the same letter. And then eventually it got to the point to where I was like, I think it's best to protect everybody and
Mhm.
so I kind of just put everything under the Jeremy ladder for the most part. So it's like now when I do that stuff, because there's a bunch of stuff that's not even on that album about teaching that I just didn't feel like doing on it, and they would be different kids' names, and so like I, just like oh I'll just make it this one magical kid, but it's really like an amalgamation of like 22 fucking little psychopaths that I love very much, and
Yeah, I think it comes back to that one of my favorite sayings in comedy is never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
yeah, dude, absolutely, man. Never, never, ever. I was like, that's the fun of comedy is it's pretty you get to lie. You just get to lie, and it's like fine to lie because you're just telling, you know what I mean? You're supposed to exaggerate because it's what's important is being funny,
Mhm.
unless you're doing like a big spoken word like type of Nanette situation where yes, being funny is important, but also like you're trying to speak to a bigger thing. But when you're just
Yeah,
starting and you're just doing stand up, it's like you should just be trying to make people laugh.
absolutely. So I heard you say on a podcast that when you were living in Richmond, you would drive hundreds of miles to do stand up,
Oh
like
yeah,
sometimes driving multiple hours each way. What would you
absolutely.
do to entertain yourself?
I just listen to music and podcasts sometimes to like call friends and talk on the phone. Just think about my set. I mean, for the most part, it would just be like I would go through waves of like I'd find a podcast I like and I would listen to that, and then the rest would be just listening to music and just like driving fast and that's it. Yeah, because I lived about like so like I worked in Richmond and I was based out of Richmond, but like I lived like an hour outside of Richmond. So like even to do the Richmond things and come to work, I was driving an hour. But then it would be like
Oh wow.
if I wanted to go to DC with no traffic, that's a 2 hour and 15-minute drive from Richmond. So it was like 3 hours from my house. And then would drive to Virginia Beach and stuff. So they would just be like you would just be driving and just putting so many miles on your car just to get because I wanted to get up every night. So like that was my
Hmm.
goal. And so like after I would say the first 4 to 5 months, I was getting up 4 to 5 times a week between Richmond and Charlottesville, Virginia, which are like they're about an hour apart from each other. So there'd be like two mics in Charlottesville a week, and you could get up 4 to 5 times a week just in Richmond, but those would be shorter sets. And like Charlottesville, because there was less comics, you could just get longer sets. And in my brain, I was like, I gotta just be on stage as long as possible, even though I was like 3 months in, and that was crazy. But it worked out for me development wise of like it worked out pretty good. But I will say that like so, and then it got to the point to where I was like, okay, now I want to get up every night of the week. And that,
Mhm.
if you wanted to do that, it would be like, okay, well then some weekends you're gonna have to drive to DC, and some weekends you're gonna have to drive to Virginia Beach, and you're gonna have to be willing to take gigs in the middle of nowhere, or do like
Mhm.
do comedy in the middle of a music open mic at some like weird little bar. So that was kind of it. And then like now that I'm in DC, you can perform in DC, um, like 12 to 20 times a week, depending on where you are. Like a brand new comic who is like willing to work super hard and drive a little bit like into the suburbs, into Virginia or Maryland, um, they can get up 10 to 12 times. And it's like with the long sets I get, and then like how I'm running around, and the fact that I'm passed at all the clubs and all the good production teams, yeah, very commonly do. I don't remember the last time I performed less than 12 times in a week, and just like getting those reps. And I'm like, man, this is so great. And people are like, oh, I'm not going to drive there. It's 25 minutes away. And then in my mind, I'm like, I've never not driven an hour to do comedy before moving up here. Like, so I'm going to I'm going to drive 25 minutes. That's fucking nothing. So,
25 minutes feels like teleportation to you
dude,
at
it's,
this
oh my
point.
God, 25 minutes? Are you kidding me? That's not even a whole episode of a podcast. I'm used to like burning through days and days of pods.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm sure you've been asked a lot about this special in particular, so I'll try to keep it brief. But I just wanted to bring up Grieving Productively.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly awesome special. I kind of put it in the same category as like I don't know if you've seen Mike Birbiglia's my girlfriend's boyfriend, or like Neil Brennan's Three Mics, but just that sort of, you're weaving comedy into such a serious topic, and I think you do
Yeah.
it really, really well.
Thanks, man. I
Um,
appreciate that. It's very, you would, I'll be honest, not that I've taken a moratorium on purpose for it, but I haven't, like just with how busy I've been with stand up, I haven't done a ton of podcasts, like, interviews and stuff. So I haven't
mhm,
been asked a lot about this, like when that was happening, I kind of just released it. It was during the pandemic. I did maybe one or two podcast things, but I wasn't at a point where I was getting asked to do a lot of
mhm.
those. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, I'm in DC. I'm like a nobody. It doesn't matter how funny you are. But like, yeah, man, that's wild because it's like I'm glad you enjoyed it, because it's like I've had people reach out who have really enjoyed it, but like that's I don't know how many people I've talked to in person or like face to face that have like actually watched it, and not like a friend or someone that I know
Mhm.
personally. So no, I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you thought it was good.
Well, well, yeah, yeah. And one of the things I think was coolest about it is the way that you kind of captured your relationship with your father.
Yeah,
So, like, anyone can relate to, you love your family even when you don't always like your family.
yeah.
And you have some good moments where you really do exemplify how close you were with your father.
Oh yeah,
And I
man.
think just starting out being at his grave is such a powerful, it's such powerful imagery, and to have it, the time jumps also I think work really well with it.
Yeah, it was really so it was really hard. Like the whole thing kind of came together. First of all, the thing of being in the grave. So like the original idea for the special was I'm going to just set up there and invite like 12 people to watch, and I'm just going to do the whole 40 minutes at his grave. And then I thought about that for all of 2 minutes and was like, this is a horrible idea. Because it's like, oh man, I can't imagine like bombing at his grave. And I was like, no, I'll just but I wanted that aspect to it because I hadn't been, so like I that part was I had not been to my dad's grave yet. So I hadn't seen it since we buried
Wow.
him, and it had been a year. And so like when he died, I immediately was going out and doing stuff, and I realized that I'd had some of this, for like, I don't know what you call archival footage, I guess is what you would, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
this older footage of like working out the jokes on the road before I had like my nice camera and stuff. I was like working out jokes on the road, like just at an open mic doing it that night, and just Like, cause the only set I didn't have, and I'm so mad I didn't, but it was because I did the mic at a venue that was like a fetish bar, so they didn't allow recording. They don't allow recording inside, so I couldn't record it. But the set in there that is the oldest is like the night he was diagnosed, and then 10 days later
Mhm.
he died, and I went out and did a set the night he died. And so I wish I had that one. I
Wow.
don't even have an audio recording of that one, but that one was like really did like 12 minutes, and I just was like it was like whoa nuts, and it went well, but it was like really crazy. But like so over the course of the year, I didn't set out to make a special about my dead dad. I'm a comic who writes about everything, but generally, like, stuff that happens to me is what I like to talk about. Or,
Mhm.
like, it's a lot of like, it's hard for me if I'm going through something to not talk about it. So I just, after 5 or 6 months, I just had like 20 minutes of stuff about
Mhm.
my dead dad. And then I was like, well, this is weird because it's like when I get asked to feature for someone at a comedy club, I can't like do this. Like I can't like I can't do 25 minutes of my dad's dead to people that have bought tickets and are like don't want to be sad or whatever. But like what I can do is I can get it all together and just like work on it at open mics and kind of when I'm headlining and pull it together. And my goal was at the 1 year mark, I'll record a special. I'll just like just so I don't have to really do that material anymore. And then yeah, and then I just was like, you know what, I want to film myself driving to the grave for the first time in a year. I wanted to film all the stuff set up. And that's like at the church that I grew up in is where my dad's buried. And so it's like, and I still know a bunch of people at the church. And so like I'm there setting up and they're just like people working out in the church trying to get it ready for like vacation Bible school and like
Oh
stuff
my
like that. And
gosh.
I'm just like, and I'm like, I just look insane because I'm dragging hardcore podcast equipment and I'm running like a of like an extension cord from the outlet in my car like out in the middle like where like if someone had been coming to visit their family they would have been like what this is the most disrespectful shit of all time. So I had to make sure that I wasn't standing on anybody else's grave and I was like keeping it as respectful as possible, but I just was like I look like a crazy person. There's people driving by being like what the fuck is this guy, because just me holding a microphone and a notebook trying not to cry while just explaining my jokes to my dad. And I just had the idea of like, oh, instead of performing there, I want my dad in it, but maybe I should just like read the jokes to him or just say them to him conversationally. And then
Mhm.
everything else kind of just came together. I had been doing Zoom stuff, so I was like, I'll do a Zoom show. And I'd been doing outdoor stuff, so I'll do an outdoor show. And then I had all these other live shows, and it just kind of naturally became how big of an editing challenge can I give myself to try to like what makes sense. And I was like, well, I think the dad stuff is a great setup, and just like you set it up there, and then just it slowly became like, oh, let's just I wanted to make it visually interesting, and I wanted it to not feel like it was a 40-minute special, and I felt like that stuff was accomplished pretty well through the editing process and being able to go back and forth and like have parts of like having the punchline be at a live show and then the tag
Mhm.
be from another live show and then oh the next tag is from a Zoom thing and then oh the laughter is from whatever and then cut back to so it was fun and it really changed um, just it's changed the way that I approach stand up comedy. So yeah, that's a long winded like explanation for it, but it wasn't planned. It just kind of all kind of came together in that way, and naturally, it just felt good to do it at the just to do that at the grave. It was very cathartic. It was like really, really, really nice for me, and it felt like a really nice tribute. And then randomly, I just like after the credits, I put in like a little 4 minute thing of my dad getting on stage with me, and I forgot that
Yeah,
I even had that. I was going
that was
through
awesome.
YouTube, just I was just going through YouTube to look through whatever, and that's the only time my dad ever got on stage, and I got it on camera. So, that I don't know, it just felt nice because it was a because I was trying to think of a way to like tie everything together, and because it wasn't part of the special, I wanted to do it after the credits, but
Mhm.
it I felt like it was just a thing where it's like I was hoping people would get to know my dad through the jokes, and then the
Mhm.
type of thing where it's like either consciously or subconsciously, it's the idea of like when you're someone you're friends with talks about their family or whatever, and then you finally get to meet that person. It's kind of like what I wanted to just show how much he, cared or whatever. So
Yeah, and I think to an extent you see you from the jokes and from that clip at the end, you can see how he influenced your life.
yeah, yeah, he's a good dude.
Um, Obviously, it would have been terrible, but you mentioned like you don't want anyone in the background. It would have been sort of an amazing visual gag to have every time you cut back to the graveyard to have like a funeral procession congregating in
Yeah,
the
that'd have been
background
great
and
if I
getting
could have gotten.
larger and larger.
Yeah, if I could have gotten that together. If I could have, yeah, if I could have been. Yeah, I was running a little one man production, doing all the audio. The editing took forever, man. I
I
never
bet.
want to edit any other thing like that because it was hard to like. I had to match the audio levels, which
Hmm.
some of those things were recorded with like the older sets, they just were what they were. So I had to match the audio levels to make it as good as I possibly could. And I think the quick editing and like it being contrasted with other stuff made the when the audio wasn't perfect not seem so bad. Like I haven't had any
Yeah,
like real
absolutely.
complaints about it. So
Yeah, I've come across that. I'm editing my podcast, and my very first episode, the interview went amazing, and I was really proud of
yeah,
it. But I learned an important lesson about not doing a podcast on a Sunday afternoon in a residential neighborhood,
yeah.
because there was two different people mowing their lawn and
Oh
dogs
man,
barking, and I had to work so hard to get that audio to be salvageable.
ugh,
Uh,
yeah, it's tough, dude. It's
but
fucking
yeah, I
hard,
mean.
man.
I think a mark of an amazing comedian is the ability to make a crowd laugh at any subject, and I absolutely think you've earned that mark with this special.
Thanks, man.
But of course, what was it like workshopping material that's entirely about death? Like, did you find yourself having difficulty getting crowds on your side when you're coming in with material like
I
that?
mean, yeah, and you would have like so the first couple sets were at mics where like at the by the time that happened, I was already pretty well respected in Richmond. So it's the type of thing where it was like when I would have newer material, the open mic regulars and the other comics who are my friends, they would want to watch. You know what I mean? Like they would try to like pay attention and stuff. Not that I was like this some great comic, but it was like I was one of the guys where they're like, "Oh, Winston's funny. We should check out his set at the mic." And they had all known, like most, like they knew, like because I think I had made a post about like pray for my dad, blah blah blah. And so I show up, and then I just start kind of talking about it. And this first few times that I did it, it went really well. Like it was a really just like people just being, that type of really well where it's like it's got nothing to do with how good the jokes are. It's just really like, man, we're seeing like someone work through something really serious and it's funny and like this is this is happening. Like where it's more like, oh my God, I can't believe he's talking about this already. Like, oh my God, like this is what a comic's supposed to do for whatever lack of a better,
And
explanation.
I think about you saying that you went and performed the night he died. I think that's super, exemplary of what a comedian is. Well, my dad died today, but I got this gig at a fet bar, so I
Yep,
gotta
I
go
gotta
milk it. Yeah.
go. I'm gonna go do this open mic. I'm gonna do 12 minutes and I'm gonna and just the reaction to it was like, so like the first set when he was diagnosed went great. And then I can't really remember the two or three after that, but I'm sure they did fine. I wasn't doing a ton of stuff in between. I like kind of took those 10 days to like just be present.
Yeah.
And then when he passed away, it did good. And then I had a guy come up afterwards and be like, "Hey man, my dad died last year. I've never really heard anyone talk about stuff like this." He said, "I thought it was really cool." And so that gave me enough fire to like really keep trying it. And then, and then you go do regular stuff and people fucking hate it. And they're just like, this sucks. This is really fucking sad. And what is going on? And it would be a thing where like then I had to be like, all right, well, I'm gonna like at open mics, I gotta do 2 minutes of really good jokes that'll get people warmed up and then do 2 minutes of this other stuff before I get off stage. And then I wrote the like the opening joke that I do about my dad being supportive. That was that when I wrote that joke ended up kind of being the key to like because I realized pretty quickly I was like, oh, you just need to give people they need a pass. You need to give them a
Hmm.
pass to feel comfortable laughing about this stuff. And I think I was like bombing talking about my dad, and I kind of just riffed that whole thing about like my dad loved me, blah blah blah. And if you die, like if your dad was, or because I was just so angry, and it fucking destroyed. And then when I was like, okay, well then I gotta. And so it kind of became a year of me trying different jokes. But the way that I work it out is that a mic, I would always do that joke first, and then 2 to 3 minutes of whatever, and then close on just a regular joke, so that like even if it didn't go poorly. And then when I was headlining, I would do my 30 to 45 minutes, and then I'd be like, "Hey guys, I'm working on this project. This is what I'm talking about. Are you guys cool if I do this?" And then I'd be like, "But don't worry, like if you don't like it, I've got another joke that I'll tack on at the end so that we can still get out of here." I was like, "Because you got your 45 minutes of shit you like. Can I work on
Mhm.
10 stuff for me?" And that seemed to work. People just really liked being in on the process. And it really helped give me the confidence to just like talk about it. Because talking about it confidently was also the pretty big part, is when you get your
Mhm.
rhythm and you can talk about it confidently, it doesn't matter when the joke doesn't work because you're just like, fuck these people. And
Yeah.
just like, I'll get them on the next one. Um, yeah. So it was tough. Like it was definitely a journey, but it made it so that like, I'm not really afraid. It made it so I'm not really nervous about talking about anything on stage, which
Yeah,
was very cool for me.
I imagine it'd be hard to to talk about a more difficult subject. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you've crossed that threshold. So just in like going through your Instagram, and for anyone listening who wants to get some examples of this, go check out Winston's Instagram. But you are really, really good at responding to hecklers, and there's tons of examples on your Instagram of just like it you. I think you walk the line really well of embarrassing them, but not in a mean way. Like
Yeah, I try
you,
really hard to not be mean, and
yeah, and
sometimes they make me mean, but in general, uh, yeah, in general, stylistically, depending on the show, I my ideal world, I'm doing like half crowd work and half material because I do like talking to people. But like, uh, if it's just like someone just interrupting and they're still having fun and they don't understand it, I don't know. There's enough comics doing like really mean type of
yeah,
comedy, and it's just not my style. I don't like being mean. I get so much anxiety about like someone being upset, and like I used to not feel that way, and now I'm like, I just want to. I just want it to be good. You know what I mean? And I think for me, stylistically, what is good for what I'm trying to do is being nicer, and just I think that's also more interesting, and I think it's tougher to do. So it's like fun to
yeah.
try to make people. It's fun to try to make people embarrass them and make fun of them, and then have them still like me. So,
It's interesting. It sort of it goes back to what you said about giving the audience a path to laugh at your material about,
yeah,
the your dad. It's like you want the audience to feel just as comfortable laughing at this person as you do.
yeah,
And being overly mean can sort of, unless you have the right audience for it, being overly mean can sort of turn your audience away.
yeah. Because to get like a when you're dealing with like a heckler, there's like a lot of different types in my opinion, but it's like in order for you to really be able to go scorched earth and like be mean as shit to them, the rest of the audience has to also hate this person.
Yeah.
And like that's sometimes a hard place to get to because a lot of the times the heckling that is the most disruptive is people having a great time where they're like, "Woo, this is yeah," or like they're yelling things out or like agreeing with you, and it's just they're fucking up the
Mm,
rhythm. But the audience
yeah.
doesn't know that they're fucking up the rhythm. So it's like, so if you snap on this woman and you're like, "Shut the fuck up, you stupid bitch," and you're just like losing it on this like fucking drunk lady that's just having a good time, or like a drunk dude that's just like, "Oh, woo, yeah," and you're just like, "You asshole, motherfucker," and you're just like losing it on these people. The audience is going to be like, "What the fuck is wrong with this guy?" Like these people love him and he's screaming at them. So you have to like slowly do it in a nice way, or like slowly explain like, "Hey," or whatever, or let someone get to the point to where like when I start to see people in the front like turning around and they seem kind of annoyed that something's happening, that's usually for me the sign that it's like I should probably I'm gonna give this person one chance. I'm gonna explain. Cause dude, I've had even times where it's like I don't post clips of it because it's not funny, but there's times where I'm like, hey, you are going to get thrown out. They're going to throw you out. Like it's like I think what you're doing is you're disrupting the show. I
Mhm.
want you to have a good time and just explaining it. And so that way when they do it, it's like, well, he told him. And it's just, and I think the nice type of dealing with it comes from teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Where you're just up there just being like, all right, you can't let these kids know that you like some of them more than you like the other ones. And you got to just like really treat everybody
Try to work
fair
in a
and,
life lesson.
yep, and try to teach something. And then and then usually, yeah, I don't know. I've that's one thing that I'm very glad that I figured out how to do because when I was first starting doing crowd work, it's like I think everybody's kind of mean sometimes when you first start because you're like, oh, that's what
Hmm.
funny is, and then you just start to, and some people get really good at being funny in that mean way and just being able to
Hmm.
like make it work, and then I always just like most of my regular jokes aren't mean, or so it's tough for me to switch and go back and forth,
Yeah, like
but
someone like Bill Burr,
yeah, it was great, an
famously.
amazing comic, so funny, but like, dude, literally, I was like, man, Mike, if he snaps on someone, it doesn't feel like out of character, like it's still part of the performance.
Mhm.
If I'm talking about the things I'm talking about and the way that I do them, and then I just snap on someone, it's like, oh man, this is the real guy. Like the nice thing
Yeah.
is the character, and it's like, no, I'm good on that.
Well, one of the last comedians I spoke to, Chris Weir, said like every comic in the room knows where that's coming from, but to all of the regular people, they're like, this person is a crazy person.
Yeah, they're insane. This person is severely mentally ill, and they should be hospitalized, and they should not have access to a microphone in a public space.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've worked with several national acts, that come into mind, Brian Regan, Dimitri Martin, some people like that. What's it like opening for a large audience that isn't there specifically to see you?
Well, honestly, it depends on the comic because it's like so I got to host for Brian Regan thanks to his like his theater opening act. One of them is my buddy Stephen Rogers. He's a
Nice.
very funny, very dope, very good, clean comic. And so we became friends through he's one of the really good comics I met through Zoom, whereas like he was one of the people that was like even though he was a professional at the time, was still so we got to meet and we became friends and then like Regan was doing stuff in clubs because he had like was doing club dates because they opened before a lot of the theaters. And
Hmm.
so we're at the Virginia Beach Funny Bone and they needed a host, so I came down there and that was interesting because it's like his show format at a club is different than anything because it's like it's the show his show format is host does like 7 minutes, feature act it does like 20, then I come back out, I do 1 to 2 minutes, bring him up, and then when he's done, I come out I bring him back up for an encore because he said people always want encore, so he has it like
Hmm.
built in. And then when he's done, I do comedy until all the checks are paid. So it's like which is brilliant. I would totally do that if I was headlining, where it's like, yeah, just like, oh yeah, the check drop is when I'm done. So very fun. I have been very lucky, knock on wood. Very few of the national acts I've worked with suck as far as like being pieces of shit. Every other touring headliner I've worked with, for the most part, like Regan, Dimitri Martin was really nice and kind. The national touring headliner that like I just opened for, who's like now become my friend, is Jamie Lee. She's like a writer for Ted Lasso, and
Oh, okay, yeah,
she played Pete Holmes's girlfriend on Crashing. So like
yeah.
that's like kind of her thing. She's great, but it's like they're all amazing. They're all just really nice, really good comics. I've been very lucky that I haven't worked with too many like really shitty people. So it's like when you perform and you're trying to, but to get back to your question, to when you're performing in front of people that aren't there to see you, sometimes it can be a little tough if you're not exactly what they want, but other times it's just like, man, like you kind of cross over with what their audience is, or like there's a reason you've been picked. Because a lot of times there's a reason you've been picked to open for these people, where it's like we
Hmm.
think that you're gonna like, people aren't trying to set you up in a bad position. I mean, Dimitri Martin was probably the biggest crowd I've ever performed in front of, and that was like a last minute, like I don't know him at all. We talked for
Hmm.
maybe 20 minutes. He was very, very sweet. He signed like a book for me, very nice. But the venue needed an opener for him. And so I got asked out of a group of like 10 people. I like sent a video or whatever, and they chose me. And like I went up, and it's the biggest audience I think I've ever performed in front of. It was like 600, 700 people, completely sold out. And it was great. It was so fun because they were just like, when you get to that level, Regan fans, Dimitri Martin fans, I've hosted for a tell. They're just comedy
Yeah,
fans. Like these are people
yeah,
that truly love comedy. Like it would probably be different if I opened for someone like I don't know Brendan Schaub. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like it would be different. Where like his fan base, like not even speaking about his skills as a comedian, his fan base is a very specific thing. Like they want a very specific type of comedy. Whereas Attell fans just fucking love stand up comedy. And
Yeah.
it's just like, and I hosted for him for 6 shows, and it was unreal. It was so fucking fun.
I feel like Dave Attell kind of falls into that category of he's very much a comedian's comedian.
He's a comics comic, man. He's one of the best, dude. And so being able,
Absolutely.
and it's fucking insane to like have gotten an opportunity to host or open for Dimitri, Dave, and fucking Regan, because those are all three people that like as a kid, because I was a huge stand
Yeah.
up fan as a kid, where I'm like, holy shit. Where it's like these guys that I've seen on TV and like adored and like helped give me a love of stand up, these people whose jokes, those are all people whose jokes I repeated to my friends as a kid
Yeah.
because I was a kid that loved stand up, and I was be like, oh man, I heard this great joke so and so told, and just all people where it's like it's kind of astounding, and it makes me feel I feel very blessed and very lucky to have the opportunity to do those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having half as much fun listening to this podcast as I had making it. That wraps up the getting to know you portion of the podcast. And before we start talking comedy, I want to remind everyone to go check out 4x3. They drop awesome original comedy content every week on their YouTube channel, youtube.com/@FOURXTHREE. Or you can find it by looking up 4x3 on YouTube. Let's get back to the show. So, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
A comedian.
That's awesome.
But I don't know if I knew I wanted to do stand up. I like there's a lot of things that like, I think a lawyer I kind of wanted to do because there's that thing where like, I don't know if it's just a Southern thing or whatever, but just like I was so good at arguing. They're like, "Oh, you should be a lawyer. You just," which is like so absurd to just think that you should that because you're good at arguing, it's like you're going to excel in education and you should spend all this money and be able to learn all the laws. It's like no, you're just good at being annoying as shit. And then like I watched some stand up and I thought it was really cool and funny and like but I was at the age where I didn't really differentiate that between Saturday Night Live or anything like that.
Yeah.
So so I think the original, the first dream job I can remember that wasn't like the typical, oh, being a vet would be cool or being a lawyer because they make money and it's cool, would probably be like being on SNL, like being on Saturday
Yeah.
Night Live. Like, yeah, Chris Farley was like, man, I was like, man, I wanted to like, I was like a little, tiny little chubby kid a little bit. And I was like, man, I really want to be on SNL. And so I would just like memorize his sketches and just like, yeah, do those. So that was like the first one. And then other stand-ups, I was like, oh, this is great. Uh, that's so good. So stand up, and comedic actor, like sketch stuff is probably was the dream job as a kid.
That's awesome. When did you decide to try it?
I decided to try it when I was like almost 25. So it's been about 8 years ago, and I was almost 25, and I had gotten out of a relationship that just really wasn't working for either one of us, and it was time for us to move on. And I quit a job I hated. It was just like not, it was not the right industry for me. I was pretty good at aspects of it. I got to work with my dad, which was really cool for a year and a half, but I was like, this is not for me. And
Hmm.
then I initially was like, I think I want to direct, so I got a camera, was like, I'm gonna make a film. And I was like, and then my brain went like, I should just like do all the things I've always wanted to do. So I can't think of like the exact impetus of like why I was like, I'm gonna do comedy. But then I got online and I just looked up comedy thing near me, and the Richmond Funny Bone was having a contest, and because I couldn't find any open mic stuff because I didn't even know that existed. I just like where can I perform comedy for the first time in Richmond, Virginia, and they had this contest, and I went and did the contest, and then I was like, oh, I just do this now. This is just what I do. I'm I'm never not gonna do this. This is just what I do. So.
So you kind of instantly caught that bug.
Oh yeah, man. I cannot remember what pushed me to, like I really like all that stuff I think pushed me, but I don't know what the final like what made me because I was like trying to shoot a short film thing first. I don't know if friends were telling me, but I just wrote 5 minutes of material and like I just said it. I had written 15 minutes of material, like three 5 minute bits on different topics, and I ran all 15 by like several friends, like just like two of my really good friends from high school, and then this girl that they were friends with that I got to know a little bit. And I was just like, of those three, I was like, which one should I do? And they picked the one, and then I just went and did it, and I won the contest, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do comedy forever. This is like the best feeling in the
That's
fucking world.
awesome. Yeah, I had a similar experience, which was that the first thing I did when I decided I wanted to try comedy was about 9 months or so ago. I just started writing down ideas and stuff that made me
Yeah,
laugh, and I finally, after I recorded the first episode of this podcast, I said, well, I need to, like, if I have a goal 10 episodes later to do stand up, I really need to write some of this out into
yeah,
material. So I did that like 2 months ago. And then finally, about 2 weeks ago, I just like trimmed it down. I had written probably 12, 13 minutes of material. And
hmm,
it was too long-winded, too specific to about me. One of the great pieces of advice I got was get to the funny.
yeah,
Sometimes I feel like as a storyteller, sometimes I feel like you need the context. You need everything that I know about
yeah,
this for you to get it, but that's not true. So I trimmed it down to about 5 minutes and then called my mom to tell her because I was thinking, if my mom doesn't laugh, I know it's not funny.
yeah,
If she does laugh, like she's honest about that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
and it cracked her up, and I thought that was awesome. It was a
That is
great
awesome.
feeling. But do you remember? I guess. Well, I guess you just sort of said it. You won that competition. So do you remember
Yeah.
the feeling of like, oh, I'm good at this? Like,
Yeah, it's weird because it's like I don't necessarily know I'm like, oh, I'm good at this or like, oh, I had a good set. I mean, like I think I still struggle with thinking if I'm good or not. But like I think that around like right around the like if I'm being honest, like right around the time my dad passed away, just getting on stage and being able to just do that and
mm,
talk about it was a real like kick in the pants to be like, oh man, like I at least have some skills doing this where it's like this feels good. I feel like I kind of know what I'm doing. So like yeah, I've had that like underlying confidence I think for about three years now. But yeah, I would say around that time was probably when it was like, oh yeah, I can do comedy. Like cuz it's like stand up's hard and people do it for years and don't ever get good and then there's a lot of people that think they're good and they're fucking terrible and I didn't want to be one of those people. So I just was like, oh, okay. But that was where it felt like, oh man, I'm figuring it out.
that's awesome. What advice? You've kind of touched on this, but what advice would you give to someone who's about to do their first open mic?
Just have fun. I mean, like, none of that shit matters, man. No one's if you go and you fucking have a bad time, as long as you don't have a complete and total meltdown, no one's gonna remember, and it's okay to bomb. Like it's, I think just knowing that there's like literally no stakes, and it feels like there's so many stakes, and it feels like it's everything, but it's like literally, if you go up and you don't have a great set, uh, but you want to keep doing it, great. And if you go up and you have a bad set and you never want to do it again, then the beauty of it is no one will ever remember you. Like I said, it just will be like I've seen so many comics who I've never seen before just have like a regular bad set. I'll never remember them. It's like the ones you remember are the people that just fucking lose it on stage. So
Yeah,
as long as you don't like lose it, you'll be fine. And having fun's so important, man. Like having fun is like I mean, like you can talk about whatever as long as you're having like a good time. Like that's what the best part of stand up is. And when you're having a good time, it's kind of what's the term? It's just contagious. Like if the audience sees
yeah,
you're having fun, like even if they're not loving the jokes, they won't hate you. And that's what really feels
yeah.
bad is when they hate you. When they hate you, it feels like this shit sucks. I hate this.
So how do you recover from a bomb like that?
You just do another set.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you just bomb, and then like now I'm at a point now where like when I bomb, depending on the show, it's like hilarious. I think it's really funny to bomb. Like I'll be
That's
bombing
awesome.
and just bombing in some rooms, and then I'll just like start. I mean, there's sometimes where I'll just start like laughing on stage, where I'm like, this is like the audience. I was like, you guys don't know how funny it is that I'm bombing right now. Like you got no clue. Like it is hilarious that that I'm not doing well. Like this is so funny. It's so funny how much you guys hated that. It's so funny that like you could not like me. Yeah. And just like learning how to embrace it and just be like, this is part of the process, as opposed to this is the end of the world. In some sets, you still feel that way because we're all human and we all have feelings. But for the most part, it's just as soon as I bomb, it's like, when's the next time I can get up? Or where are my friends? Let's talk about how bad this went. But it's like, I do so many sets that it's just like, the bombs just don't really feel like anything unless they're like huge deals. Like, if you're getting paid a bunch of money or you're doing like a big show for someone, it's like those will sting for a little bit. But like a regular open
Yeah.
mic, oh my God, who gives a fuck all those people? Who gives a shit?
That's
It's
awesome.
just
So, I mean, you said you went on 8 to 12 times a week for the last 8 years or so. I guess that comes from having reps and just knowing there's going to be
oh
another
yeah, man.
show.
You just keep doing it, dude. Yeah, it's like it's crazy. Like I think like man, if I do the math, like I think last year I did like 800 and something sets, and it's just like you just kind of
Holy crap.
yeah, you just kind of just get that in, right? Like so it's like it's yeah, I think it's like yeah, it's like 52. If I do the math right, it's like 52 times like 15. So like yeah, like 780, 800. I think I came really close to that. And it's like it just
Wow.
comes from just fucking doing it, man. And you just get comfortable where it's like I am now, there's no that's like one of the skills that I think that I've very lucky to have. It's just like even if I'm eating shit, it's like I don't I don't really look frazzled usually. Like it's just
Yeah,
like all right, whatever.
that's awesome. That's a really healthy mentality to have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's taken a while. It's taken therapy, but we're getting there.
That's awesome. What's the most challenging aspect of comedy for you?
Um, for me now, the thing that I think is the most challenging is I think stand up can be a thing that is really disheartening for a lot of reasons. Like doing poorly can be disheartening if you don't have a lot of gigs on your calendar and you see your friends do, and not like, oh, they don't deserve those, but just like, well, what do I need to do to get there?
Hmm.
Um, like when you see, someone really pop off in a way famously, and you're not like it's not like, oh, they're terrible comics, but when you see something that's like, oh man, like this is not what I do, I'll never be able to do this. If this is what
Hmm.
people want, I don't know if I can do that. Having really mean hecklers, like there's just so much in comedy that can be really disheartening that I think staying encouraged, I think, is like one of the most difficult things. And that's why I think having like a good support group, a good safety net of people, whether it's like your partner or friends or family or like other comics, that all the other stuff kind of comes and goes. But the one consistent is, in stand up, I think, is just how discouraging pursuing a performing art can be. And I think that's across the board
Yeah.
with other things because it's a job a lot of people want, and you
Hmm.
can work very hard, and a lot of luck is involved. And I've got some really funny, really great, successful friends, and being able to be really happy for them and excited for them helps me stay encouraged. Because there's a lot of comics that I think have the mindset of, fuck that dude, I want that, I should have that spot. And a thing that helped me to learn, and or like I discovered in therapy that really helps, is it's like, no, like when other people get stuff, even if it's someone that I've been doing comedy longer than, or like I feel like I might be more skilled than, it's just like, oh man, if this person is getting it, then of course one day I'll get it. This is great. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like looking at it
Yeah.
as opposed to being like, oh, it's like, oh man, it's like, or if that person gets it, it's like, oh, they were meant to get that. I don't fit that role, so why am I upset about a spot that I wasn't meant to get? And then focusing on the next thing. And since I've been doing that for about 3 to 4, maybe 4.5 years, like being at that point, as opposed to being the stereotypical comic where you're just like kind of mad and salty and a hater
Hmm.
about shit. Just switching that mindset is really helped. There's always times where you're going to be upset and feel those things, but to be able to stay grounded and come back to that, I think I've gotten to do a lot of the coolest things I've gotten to do in comedy. I've gotten to do since I have switched to actively trying to have that mindset, and like sharing in other comics joys, and just like being like, oh man, like just seeing how excited people are, and teaching help too, because when you see someone excited about something when you're teaching, it really is like hard to not
Yeah.
also be excited for them.
Yeah. For me, like when I worked at the zoo, I love animals. I grew up going to the zoo probably 3 or 4 times a week. And
Oh
at one
wow,
point in my,
that's a
yeah,
lot. That's a lot of zoo stuff. That's a
Yeah,
great
and to
deal
the
of zoo material. Like that's
to the point where like by the time I was a teenager, going to the zoo was sort of boring for me. But then
oh wow.
I started working with kids and getting to introduce kids to those animals and seeing their reaction reminded me how special this was and how awesome it was to get to be there.
That's yeah, man, that's wild that you would go to the zoo like 2 to 3 times a week. Dude, there's like entire months where I don't even think about zoos. Where I don't even like remember that they're a thing, and then you're just going 2 to 3 times. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I worked there for 6 years. I worked at the Cincinnati Zoo. We had the famous Harambe incident.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
damn, dude. Oh yeah.
so
Woo, were you there when that happened?
no, over the course of 7 years, I worked there for six. The 1 year I didn't work there.
Damn,
You
that would
know,
be that's wild.
absolutely. It was crazy coming back because all of my friends who were there that during that kind of painted that day for me, like pieced it together. So I have a very vivid like idea of what happened with that family and what like how
That's so
inevitable that incident was going to be. Um,
God, dude.
but
That's
yeah,
crazy.
that was a woman walking around with eight children, all in the like 3 to 6 range. And supposedly people overheard her saying, or like overheard the kids saying, "I'm gonna get in with the gorillas," and she was just like,
Um,
"No, you're not."
oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, so my my version of teaching, I think I pulled a lot away from just interacting with guests at the zoo, interacting
Yeah,
with the kids.
very
You
cool.
you learn to be patient and
Yeah.
civil.
Yes, you do.
All right, so we're wrapping up here. Just a couple of more questions,
Yeah.
and thank you so much for being on. This has
Yeah, no
been
problem.
awesome. What do you love about comedy?
I like the community. It's the community. Like I made the best friends in my life doing this. I like the late nights. I like the hanging out. And man, there is something just it's cliche, but like man, just getting on stage and just being able to entertain a group of people with just my words is it's a really powerful feeling. Um, those are probably my favorite aspects of comedy. I love
That's awesome.
jokes. I love jokes so much.
Yeah, I as a kid I had dozens and dozens of like just street jokes, I think is what people call them, just
Yeah,
like the setup punchline jokes memorized, but never was confident enough to write anything
yeah.
myself. What's the most valuable piece of advice you've received from a fellow comedian?
Oh man, this is a good question. I got a lot of really good advice. But the best advice I ever got, and one that I give all new comics, is listen to all the advice you ever get and just take what works for you. So that was the
Mm.
single best piece of advice. I got that advice from a guy that doesn't do comedy anymore. His name's David C. Wingfield. He was a comic. He opened for a lot of urban headliners. Like he was one of Charlie Murphy's
Oh, okay.
feature acts. Just this really nice guy that I knew from Richmond, Virginia, and he was like when I started, he was like one of the 2 to 3 people in the area that were full time, like they're professional comedians, and he was very much a club comic, like set up punchline jokes, we talk about observational stuff. But we were talking, and I think I asked the same question, like, "What's the good advice?" And he said the best advice he got was like, "Just listen to what everybody has to say to you. Like, there's no reason to if someone's trying to help you and they're not being condescending and annoying about it, listen to them because some dumb people might have some really good advice and just like and it doesn't cost anything to listen to what people are trying to say to help you. And then, you can try it or you can listen to it and then you can parse out like, I don't think that'll work for me, but that was coming from a really kind, good place that the person tried to help me. So that's the one that's helped me the most is listen to all the advice you get, but only take what works for you. And that's really helped like me not be mad when someone tries to talk to me or give me a note or anything like that and realize like, oh, this like if they didn't, care for me or didn't want me to succeed, they wouldn't even be talking to me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you were to teach a comedy workshop, what would be your focus?
I think the focus outside of like the simple stuff like oh moving a mic stand or like blah 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 is I have had a lot of people ask me to teach a crowd workshop. I've had a lot of people
Okay.
like so if I had to do one, it would probably be that. Like I understand and I'm really, I feel like I know how to do all the other aspects of comedy. But I think it's really hard to teach a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in crowd work that I see people doing that aren't good at crowd work, and it's like, oh man, this is like you're hurting the show. And just
Mm.
like, I think there's a lot of etiquette with crowd work that people don't understand and a lot of other stuff that you can do. But so, yeah, I would probably teach a crowd work thing. And it's not like, oh, I can make you magically quick and funny, but it's like, I mean, like, I could tell you places to start and like how to go about doing it and stuff. So if I was going to teach one, it would probably be that. But I've been asked a lot to like teach that, and I just haven't. I don't know. I don't believe in teaching comedy classes, so I haven't done it.
That's awesome though. Yeah, I mean it's awesome that people. Yeah, I also saw that you really do have a knack for that. So it's awesome that other people are noticing that.
Yeah.
All right, Winston, and my final question for you today: if you could have any job in the world of comedy, what would it be?
Oh man, I mean, honestly, it's just stand up. Like, I would love to be a touring national headliner. It's like I don't want to be this television writer that doesn't get to do stand up anymore. I don't really want to have my own sketch show or anything. Like, if I get those things, that would be great. Just because financially it would be awesome, but it would all be I would be doing those things so that I could afford to still do stand up. It's my favorite thing in the world. I just want to do stand up. So being a touring national headliner, working clubs and having fans, that's the dream job in comedy.
That's awesome. Well, Winston, I think you're well on your way. Thank you
I
so much for
appreciate it,
being
man.
on today.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. Yeah,
thank you
sorry.
so
I feel
much.
like I wasn't super funny in this one, but I just wanted to, answer your
No,
questions
man.
honestly.
Yeah. So I've run into my dad goes, but how are you going to make it funny?
Yeah,
And what I keep saying about this podcast is I want it to be the reason some people get into comedy and the reason some people don't.
yeah, that's
So
perfect. But yeah, I
yeah.
was like,
So
you know what? I'm not going to be funny or on. I'll just answer these questions and be sincere.
I,
So hopefully that worked for you.
it's perfect. I really appreciate it, Winston. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.